In the previous video, we completed all the work on Schoma View in Adobe Camera Raw. So it's now time to move it on to Photoshop. Now I'm back in Bridge at the moment, so I'll just select the image and Control and the O key. Now that will open this raw file into Photoshop. Because it's a raw file, it will have to open, so this Photoshop, it will have to open via Camera Raw. Now in this case, Photoshop is hosting Camera Raw, which is why it took a bit of time to open. Now if you look in Camera Raw, these are all the adjustments that we made previously, and we want to open it into Photoshop. I just want to confirm that the workflow options, Pro Photo RGB, 16 bits per channel, are still selected. Okay, so these are the attributes that will be applied to the image as it goes to Photoshop. So it's a raw file at the moment. As soon as it goes to Photoshop, it is no longer a raw file. Now it's going to say up here that it is DNG, but that is because we haven't resaved the image yet. It's still assuming it's a raw file, but of course we can't work on a raw file in Photoshop. I'd just like to confirm first of all that those workflow options have come through with the image. So how can we check that? Well, if we look in the file name again, it's actually got RGB/16, which is telling us that it's a 16 bit per channel image. We can also confirm if we go to Edit, Assign Profile, and it says here the working profile is Pro Photo RGB. Again, we're confirming that. Now, if you have an image that hasn't got an assigned profile, this is the menu that you would use to assign a profile. Okay, so hopefully you'll never need to use this, and I'm going to cancel that. We can also go to Edit, Convert to Profile, and this is where you would convert the color space that your image is in, and we can see profile is Pro Photo RGB. So if we were to be making this into an image for digital projection, where we know they have to be in the sRGB color space, this is where we do it. And we can see the destination space is set to sRGB. We can select the drop down, and there we have Adobe 1998 sRGB. Okay, so this is where you would find your color spaces. Also notice these are all color profiles for printing. So it kind of confirms that printer profiles and color spaces, they're all the same thing. It's just that we apply different terminology and different ones to the different functions. So these are for images, and all these down here are for when we're using printers. Okay, but it's all the same kind of idea. So I'm just going to click away, leave it at the destination, but I'm going to cancel because I don't want the color space to change at this time. We can also check through a thing called the info panel, and to get the info panel we need to go to Window, and there's Info, and there's all the other panels that Photoshop has, and if you see a check against it, it means it's visible on your in your workstation at present. But a lot of these are very useful for certain types of work that you might be doing. If you're doing text, then you might want some character, the character panel. Okay, so it's worth just having a look down here to see if there's any of these that might be useful for the sort of work that you're always doing. I'll just click away from that, and of course you can move these panels around and dock them wherever you wish into a nice representation, so everything's at hand for you. So let's just go back to the info panel, and the information is here. Look, Pro Photo RGB 16 bits per channel. It also tells us about the amount of pixels in the image, scratch disk, and things like that. That information can be changed just by going to the menu here, and you've got panel options, and so you can just check which bits of information you wish to see in the info panel. Select OK. Okay, so we know that it's got the right attributes as it's come into Photoshop. I'll just select the area there and Control and 0 just to magnify it up a bit. Now the first thing I normally do is to resave the image. Now it was a raw file, but it can no longer operate as a raw file, so we need to save it as in my case, a Photoshop file. So I'm going to go to File, Save As, and it comes up with this dialog box, and it's actually telling me that the default location will be the same place as where my raw file is, and I'm going to accept that. So I'll just select so we can see where it's going, resources for video demo. Now normally I keep my raw files and my worked files on two separate hard drives, so I'd have a totally separate folder for anything that I create in Photoshop. But for this demo I'm going to save the Photoshop file, and we can see it's going to be a PSD, a Photoshop file, in the same place as where the raw file is, purely for demonstration purposes, and you can see the things developing. It's going to have the same file name, but because the extension is different, it's going to be PSD for a Photoshop file, as opposed to a DNG, which was the raw file. Both files can coexist because they've got different extensions. I'll just click on Save, and we're ready to progress. I normally save at the beginning so that if I get called away or something happens to the computer, at least the work that I've done so far will be saved in a relatively up-to-date fashion. Now we're going to assume that we don't really know what the final destination, the final output of this image is. I could create a print, or I could create a digital projected image. But there's certain things that we can do to this image first before we know what we will finally create. So that's what I'd like to do, show you now. We're going to assume that there's a few blemishes on this image. There isn't really, but we'll just use parts of the image to assume there are, and we'll just cover some adjustment layer issues as well. But because we did most of the work in the raw converter, this image really wouldn't maybe need much work on it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove some of the flowers, the white flowers that you could possibly say are distracting in this image. And we're going to use the layers panel. And here's the layers panel. And again, if you haven't got the layers panel visible, go to Window, Layers. Okay. Just click away. So the idea of using layers is that everything we do can be undone. It's kind of non-destructive editing. And to create a new layer, we go to the layers panel and we select here, because we're going to do all the work, all the retouching work on this new layer. So go to new layer, select that, and there it appears. We can go into there, we can just double click in there and call it clones, because that's basically what we're going to do, or healing. Enter. Now at the moment that layer is blank. I'll just wink out the background image, and that checkerboard appearance represents, that's Adobe's way of saying there's nothing there. It's blank, it's a blank layer. It's like a piece of transparent plastic over the top of your image, nothing on it. Okay, just bring back the background. But the good thing about layers is we can copy information from the background onto the blank layer, and we're going to use what's called the healing brush. And if we go to the healing brush here, by just selecting wherever you see a tool with a little triangle to the bottom right, it means there are additional tools within that. So if you keep your left button pressed, you can see the additional tools within there. I'm going to use the spot healing brush tool, and the idea is we will just click on the image and the healing will appear on the clones layer. but we need to make sure that we have sample all layers selected. Also, this spot healing brush has 3 different ways, content aware, create texture and proximity match, of creating this magic healing effect. Now I tend to use the content aware or the proximity match for most of the work, and depending on the type of work that you're doing, depends on which one of these is most effective. Okay, so we'll try each of those. Also, we have the blending mode. Now you'd normally have this set to normal, but there are 1 or 2 blending modes that you could possibly try if you wish, but normally you'd stick to normal. So it just applies a healing paint blob over the top of the image. And you've got the size of the brush you can change here. Okay, so we've got everything set up. We've got the spot healing tool brush selected, and the idea of this is that we can just select the image. Well, just click on the image. I'm going to get rid of some of these white flowers, say, and you just keep clicking. Now I'm not too happy with the way it's doing that using content aware, so I'm going to go to proximity match. And of course, if you're not happy with what you've done, you've got the history panel, and you can always just go back to before you started and start again. Okay. Now when you're doing this sort of work, you need to make sure that the patterns that you're creating aren't obvious repetitions of adjacent pixels. Now I've just kept the left button selected and drew an area there, and you can see it's created quite a decent fill there. I'll do the same thing here. Okay, and it's using adjacent areas to fill in the gap. And once you've done it, you might want to just go over it again just to disguise the fact that you're dragging in information from somewhere else. I'll just try the seabird, the seagull. I'm not quite happy about that, so I'll just undo that. Or you could do Control and Z, and we'll go to content aware, see if that makes a better effect. Probably better. Let's get rid of that contrail. Okay, so let's just see what's happening on our layer, the clones layer. I'm going to wink out the background, and you can see this is what is going on. It's actually creating parts of an image over the top of the background. Okay, so that is the whole point of using a layer. But we can also, I'll just wink it out again, if we're not happy about, say, the seagull area, which is that one there, we could actually go to the eraser tool. There's the eraser tool. Just magnify it up a little bit, make it a little bit bigger, and we could just get rid of it. Go back to our background, and there's the seagull back again. Okay, go to our spot healing. So we can modify what is going on the that new layer. Also within the layers panel, we have a thing called adjustment layers. And if we select the adjustment layers, these are all the adjustment layers that are available for use. And when you select one of these, it creates a new layer or above the layer that you have selected, but it will be an adjustment layer. It's like an infinitely variable filter doing one of these things. Okay, so say we want to make it into, maybe we want to color pop an image. So we have basically a black and white image, and we bring back some of the color information behind it. Well, we can apply a black and white adjustment layer over the top. There we go. We can change the properties of the image using these adjustments here within the properties panel. Okay, so there's the blues. Let's make the blues a bit darker in the sky. Okay, and by targeting different colors, just like we could do in Adobe Camera Raw, we've got similar sort of facilities in here. Now say we wish to bring back some of the information, the color information, in the lower part of the image. We have attached to the adjustment layer a mask. Okay, and the idea of a mask is we can paint on the mask to reveal underlying image data. So at the moment the white mask is saying everything in this adjustment layer, the black and white adjustment layer, is visible. So everything appears black and white. However, if we go to the paintbrush, there's the paint, and we select a black paint to paint on a white mask, make sure you select the mask. I'm going to do this very quickly, but we can paint on the mask to reveal the underlying color information. Okay, you can do it in different areas. If you wish to remove some of that color information, just change the paint color to white, foreground color, and we can erase it. We can change the opacity of the brush we're using, so we just get a slight effect. Okay, so that is the idea of an adjustment layer and a mask. So let's just select that and delete that. Delete the light, yes. Okay. Another really useful one is the gradient. So if we go to gradient, there's the gradient. Now the gradient, we've got different gradients that we can select, but the default one is that one there. Okay, just select away. And it's saying I'm going to use the foreground color, which is black, so make sure you had black selected in the first place, to transparent. Okay, and we can change, you can see it's been applied to the bottom of the image. So if we wanted to darken the sky down, we could reverse where it is. We can select in the image and drag up and down. We can change the scaling of this so we get a sharper gradient, like a much harsher Cokin filter type of effect. Okay, so once we got it where we want it and to the blending degree here, we say OK. And the idea now is, it doesn't look too good, does it? But we can change the blending mode. And if we go up here into the layers panel, we can change that to either overlay or maybe soft light. Okay, and if it's still too harsh, we can change the opacity. Okay, until we get it just right. If we wish to change it again, just go double click the gradient there, and it brings up our panel again. So we can go back into the image and change the position of it, do whatever we want. So it's infinitely changeable. Okay. So we've virtually got the image to a state where it's ready to go to either print or digital projection, and of course those two types of work would require further treatment. We need to crop and resize and things. So what about final sharpening? Well, again, you need to have the image in the correct size and the correct number of pixels and everything before you apply any final sharpening. So as a start image, this is about as far as we can go. So I'm going to resave the image. So to File, and then just save. We've already saved it as a file name, so this is just going to add this work to the file, the saved file, and it's now ready to be processed. And I'm going to decide it's going to be made into a print. So I'll show you in the next video how I would go about processing this to a final print.